I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and this is Middle East Now. Thanks for joining us. We are beginning our broadcast in the north of Israel, where the fighting with Hezbollah remains fiery. An Israeli airstrike on a building in a central neighborhood at the Lebanese capital of Beirut on Sunday reportedly killed the top spokesman for the Hezbollah terror group. The strike comes as the IDF continues to intensify military pressure on Hezbollah, with ceasefire talks now gaining steam. Our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osaran, has the details.
Ceasefire talks or no talks, Israel continues to target senior Hezbollah officials. In a rare airstrike in central Beirut and with no prior warning, the IDF eliminated Hezbollah's spokesperson, Mohammed Afif.
The Israeli enemy targets civilian buildings to pressure the resistance and to divert attention from its own defeat, and also to weaken the steadfastness of our fighters.
Less than a month ago, Afif had to cut short a press conference in Beirut's southern suburb after the IDF issued an evacuation warning for the area. Throughout Sunday, the IDF continued to strike from the air Hezbollah targets across Lebanon, in the southern villages, the Bekaa Valley, and Beirut's southern suburbs. On the ground, Israeli forces deepen their operation in southern Lebanon and uncover Hezbollah weapon sites as ceasefire talks gain further steam.
Hezbollah has paid a big price. Its chain of command has collapsed. Many of its operatives have been killed and extensive infrastructure dismantled. If they continue to fire, we will continue to fight, to implement plans, to go further, conduct deep strikes, and hit Hezbollah very hard. We will stop when we know that we are bringing back the residents of northern Israel in safety.
Meanwhile, Hezbollah launched dozens of rockets into northern Israel, likely injuring 2 people. This comes a day after a heavy barrage directly hit a synagogue in Haifa, northern Israel's largest city, injuring 2 civilians.
This is an everyday synagogue, and it's the place where we study. And the other building is the main synagogue. And they are both completely destroyed, but we are very happy that no one was inside.
According to reports, Hezbollah received the American ceasefire proposal and is planning its response. Until then, Israel will further intensify its military pressure, continuing to strike Hezbollah across Lebanon.
Well, joining us now from Haifa in northern Israel is our correspondent, Nicole Tzedek. Nicole, what is the latest in terms of the ongoing rocket fire that we've been seeing into Israel? I know that yesterday Haifa saw heavy fire.
That's right, Natasha. Now, most recent sirens sounded just north of here about 15 minutes ago in Rosh Hanikra. No word from the IDF or any local authorities how big that barrage was or if anyone was injured, but usually by this time we would know if there were any impacts in the area. So no word of that yet, but that's the most recent barrage. Earlier in the day, a barrage of about 15 rockets was fired towards the Matat and surrounding area. One person was lightly injured in that, as well as several others that were taken to the hospital just because of an anxiety attack. And that's what we do see commonly in many of these different barrages. People either injured from running to the shelter or just from different anxiety attacks. And that's exactly what we saw yesterday during that barrage of 10 rockets that was fired pretty much 24 hours ago at this point towards Haifa. Some of them intercepted, but some of them, as Ariel Osaran mentioned in his report, impacting a synagogue nearby. I was actually at that synagogue just earlier today speaking to some of the nearby residents, and just 24 hours later, it's still completely closed off, still glass lining the sheets and there's the streets. And so the damage to the synagogue itself is certainly something to look at, but it's also all of the surrounding apartments that their windows are completely busted open. And so that's what often happens in these rocket barrages. Even if there is an impact or even just falling shrapnel, it not only destroys the cars, it can bust open these windows and certainly cause a lot of damage on the streets for those residents, but no one injured in that attack except for people running to the bomb shelter. And so that's the most recent that we have seen up here in the Haifa Bay area and really throughout northern Israel today.
All right, Nicole, thank you for that update. We're going to be turning now to our guests in the studio. We have international affairs analyst Dan Perry joining us and Brigadier General in the Reserves Israel Relek Shafir, a former commander with the Israeli Air Force. All right. So where do negotiations for a ceasefire stand at this point between Israel and Hezbollah? Obviously, there have been ongoing reports as to what appears to be somewhat of a movement forward and then a step backwards. Give us the latest.
Well, the U.S. is peddling a proposal that we got reports on about 2 days ago, which seems to be very close to the Israeli proposal, minus, we believe, Israel's request for the right to operate inside Lebanon if it deems the agreement to have been violated, something that would clearly be a violation of Lebanese sovereignty. For them to agree to it as part of an agreement seems unlikely. But the proposal would, it appears, I haven't seen it, but it appears based on reports and leaks, to be essentially an implementation of 1701, meaning Hezbollah pulls back from the border, X amount of distance, maybe to north of the Litani River, and the Lebanese armed forces take over the area in the south. Right. Basically, Lebanon enforcing its own sovereignty over its own territory like a normal country.
And Israel would just have to hope and pray, essentially, that that would actually happen, which is unlike what has happened since that resolution was passed initially.
I assess it would happen, and the reason for this is because the support for it in Lebanon is overwhelming, and the government itself is saying they want this. And interestingly, the Lebanese army stayed neutral in this war. Think about that. Israel's bombing Lebanon, according to some reports, indiscriminately and doing terrible things, and Lebanese army is neutral. This is because they actually, the body politic in Lebanon wants Israel to succeed against Hezbollah. So they'll probably allow it, but then the question is, will they not start sneaking back in, slowly but surely, within a year or two or three, recreate what they had? It kind of seems unlikely, because if you'll notice the degree of the intensity of what we've seen, both with Hamas and with Hezbollah, far exceeds anything that came prior. And it may be a case, and I say this very cautiously, that the fact that Israel lost all patience and in the eyes of many people went too far has sort of created a shock that will enable some version of quiet for a time. A little bit analogous to what people thought had happened in 2006 when Hezbollah was deterred for maybe 3, 4, 5 years, but then of course they came back.
I'd like to turn to you, Herzog. Obviously, today we're seeing reports that for the first time since Israel launched its ground offensive against Hezbollah, forces from the IDF, artillery corps more specifically, have crossed the border and are operating deeper inside southern Lebanon. I mean, at this point, what are their goals? We keep on hearing this number parroted that 80% of Hezbollah's weapons have been destroyed, but we've been seeing very heavy rocket fire over the course of the last 2 weeks from Hezbollah, indicating that perhaps that's not necessarily the case.
Well, it all depends on what is heavily. You're talking about, let's say, 100 to 200 rockets. What we expected before the war started was something closer to 3,000 to 4,000 per day with precision guided munition. Now we're seeing non-precision munition numbers 100 to 200, with the number of casualties in Israel very low, much lower than expected. So let's put that aside. The idea is to put enough pressure on Hezbollah and Lebanon to agree to 1701. The idea that within the framework, Israel would be allowed to strike against Hezbollah is most probably the Israeli way of putting an extra mile, so to speak, within, so that it'll be able to take it out in lieu of something else, because that is something that a sovereign country or even a non-sovereign country can never accept. But Israel has the right, if Hezbollah breaks the agreement, to intervene. Surely it does. And
but it can't be formalized.
It probably can't be formalized. Nobody can accept that. So I guess it was put in just for the sake of, I would say, sake of argument on the table to be taken off at a later stage.
Right.
Will the French intervene and be part of the force? Will the Americans? Is the Lebanese army going to be there? Is it going to be fortified? What is it going to look like? Right. The scene is not clear yet, but enough that 1701 will be implemented with a quiet backing of the United States for Israel to intervene on the ground and from the air in case Hezbollah creeps back in, that would probably do. Another question that you asked is what happens close to the border. Those points that have direct contact with Israeli communities had been razed to the ground. So that is something that the forces are busy doing right now.
One quick
All right,
point.
we have to unfortunately move on to our next story, but we will continue this discussion because we're going to be speaking about Iran right now. Iran has reportedly given assurances to the United States that Tehran is not seeking to kill the American president-elect, and that would be Donald Trump. This comes as tensions between the two countries continue to grow, with Iran displaying missiles and defense systems in a new exhibit on the heels of a visit from the UN nuclear watchdog chief, Rafael Grossi. Our senior correspondent, Bianca Zanini, wraps it up. Take a look.
On display, a warning for Israel and the U.S. as tensions between the West and the Islamic Republic of Iran continue to rise. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps showcasing a number of its missile and defense systems, some of them capable of reaching Israel and U.S. bases in the region.
I felt so proud that we have boosted our defensive power to the extent that the aggressors can't even think about attacking us.
The show of force comes as the world awaits an Iranian retaliatory strike on Israel, after the IDF targeted military sites in Iran in late October in response to a previous Iranian attack. Tehran has reportedly said they will wait to respond until after U.S. President-elect Donald Trump takes power.
We're going to bring peace. You're going to have peace in the Middle East.
Meanwhile, Trump is expected to reinstate his sanctions-led maximum pressure policy on Tehran to prevent it from acquiring nuclear weapons. Leading up to the weekend, Rafael Grossi, the UN nuclear watchdog chief, visited Tehran in an effort to restart negotiations. But in an interview with Iranian state television, the country's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi said that an opportunity for nuclear diplomacy with the West is limited. Araghchi also addressed reports that Iran's ambassador to the UN held a secret meeting with Trump supporter billionaire Elon Musk, discussing the growing tensions. Araghchi denying any opening of talks.
No, it definitely did not happen. It was simply fabrication by American media.
According to U.S. intelligence, Iran is armed with the largest number of ballistic missiles in the Middle East.
Well, joining us now is Andrea Stricker. She's the Non-Proliferation and Biodefense Program Deputy Director at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. So to begin, should we be taking Iran's word for it? Is Iran really not interested in taking out Donald Trump?
Well, good evening. Thank you for having me. I think we can realistically expect that no, Iran likely will not try to assassinate Trump while he's president, simply because this would mean the end of the regime when America would retaliate. However, I think his security team has to take those plots seriously and seek to disrupt any active plots just in case. But the Biden administration has really done very little to make clear to Tehran that this kind of activity and Iranian malign actions overall will not be tolerated. But I think Trump's election and the return of the U.S. willingness to use force to make clear to its adversaries that they can't go on like this is already creating a sort of a cooling off in the region and beyond.
Now, the Islamic Republic has showcased a number of its missile and defense systems, some of them capable of reaching Israel and also American bases in the region. But how worried should Israel and the U.S. be about the Iranian threat at this point, following Israel's widespread and widely deemed successful retaliatory strikes on Iranian military infrastructure last month?
Well, certainly Iran has the capability to launch massive missile and drone attacks against Israel. That hasn't changed. What Israel did, though, by taking out its capability to quickly build new missiles, as well as its air defenses, means the regime has to think twice about carrying out an attack like this. If it would strike now, it stands to lose major additional missile facilities, potentially economic and oil production sites, and potentially nuclear sites. So I do believe that they won't retaliate while Trump is coming into office.
Now, Israel reportedly hit an Iranian nuclear research facility as well. How may Iran respond if this report does turn out to be true?
I actually don't think Iran will respond. So Israel really did something ingenious here by hitting a facility associated with Iran's undeclared nuclear program. That's a facility that the IAEA, the nuclear watchdog, does not safeguard. Allegedly, this facility, Taliban 2, was involved in some renewed experiments that would help the regime set off a nuclear weapon. But Israel stayed under the president's red line of not targeting the major nuclear sites because in order to protest, Iran would have had to admit that it was violating its nuclear non-proliferation treaty obligation not to work on nuclear weapons. Right. So Israel really did the world a service here by creating a potential bottleneck in the program.
All right, Andrea Stricker joining us from the States. Thank you for that breakdown. Very interesting to hear about the report on the nuclear facility more specifically. We're going to be turning now to Syria. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq have reportedly shifted their plans to launch their drone attacks at Israel from Syrian territory. This is all part of a ploy to avoid Israeli or American retaliation on Iraq for security and political reasons, according to these reports. The Qatari news outlet The New Arab has cited 3 sources saying that due to Iraqi pressure, recent attacks on Israel were launched from Syrian territory on the Syria-Iraq-Jordan border triangle. And joining us now is our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osran. So, Ariel, what do we know about the validity of these reports?
Right, Natasha. So this is a singular report, but it does come following additional statements that we have heard from elements in Syria and in Iraq indicating that out of fear of dragging Iraq into the bank of targets that Israel holds against Iran's proxies that are targeting it from various arenas. So Iraq wants to distance itself from that. And according to this report, citing 3 Iraqi sources, pro-Iranian militias in Iraq, that's an umbrella title for 6 Shiite militias that operate under Iranian auspices. So they have transitioned to launch their attacks, which have been amplifying, becoming nearly a daily occurrence, those drone strikes on Israel. So they've shifted that to the triangle border area of Syria, Iraq, and Jordan, mainly the Rutba Desert and the El Qaim area in just north of the border in western Iraq. Now, this would go in line with additional statements that we have heard specifically from Iraqi officials saying that they had informed Iran that they refused to allow their territory to be a launch pad for strikes against Israel. We know that as Iran has been vowing to target Israel once more, they, now that their air defenses are pretty much rendered incapacitated, so they are refusing to allow Iran to use Iraqi soil as the launch pad for strikes. And so this would indicate that there is significant pressure from Iraq towards Iran to keep it out of the fray. I will just note that there is another possibility that what we're seeing here is perhaps the opposite. This is Iranian pressure trying to press the Assad regime to get more involved in the conflict against Israel. We know that Syria has been perhaps the quietest link in this axis and this chain of pro-Iranian proxies across the region. And so Israel has been targeting Syria, Hezbollah sites, also now on a daily basis, but this is an interesting development regarding Syria's and Iraq's involvement in attacks against Israel.
All right, Ariel Osran, thank you for the information on that report. I'm going to turn back to our guests in the studio. Dan, I want to turn to you first. Will these proxies be able to act more freely in Syria with the backing of Assad rather than in Iraq, where we know the government is U.S. friendly?
I'm not sure they're going to ask his permission. In a way, there's good news and bad news. It clearly shows that these militias do the bidding of Iran, but it's not a big surprise. I'm slightly impressed by Iraq's steadfast stand. It's not exactly a pro-American government. They're very torn between their dependence on Iran. Remember, it's a Shiite government, basically. So these militias in Iraq have been a destabilizing force. They have badly harmed Iraq's potential to become some version of an Arab democracy. They're somewhat the stepchild of Iran's various proxies. The Houthis and Hezbollah get all the press. In a way, this reflects how badly Hezbollah has been battered, that Iran feels the need to deploy them because they had a version of plausible deniability of these militias. It's very dangerous. If there's thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands in Syria, and we know there's thousands of Houthis that have arrived in Syria as well, they can cause a lot of mayhem, and in particular, the danger is an attempt to attack Israel through Jordan or to destabilize Jordan.
All right, which makes me turn to you, Relic. I mean, what does this reported shift to Syria ultimately mean for Israel's ability to act against these Iranian groups?
Well, it makes it easier, and remember that this area in Syria is no man's land. So being under the auspices of Assad is not exactly the question here. There is a number of players, as we said, the Houthis, the Kurds as well, putting pressure on Iraq. And the fact that Syria is really in no man's land, Assad doesn't control that area, nobody really controls that area. So that allows some leeway for those militias to fire from, but it also gets them as targets closer to Israel and easier to hit them. They don't have infrastructure there and they have to rebuild it. So that puts in question the idea that it's a short-lived initiative because we're getting about 2 months away from the end of the war, more or less, and everybody's shifting gears to hit the most. Now, remember the Kissinger strategy. When you go to the table to negotiate, you fire all you have, and it applies to both sides, to get out most of what you can. As far as the area of deniability, as they say, denial is not a river in Egypt. So everybody's putting out misinformation, disinformation, talking to the media, letting out all kinds of fake news. And we should be careful in understanding the logic. Who wants what when you read something?
All right. Well, we're going to turn to a totally different topic right now, and that would be the ultra-Orthodox demonstrators that we've been seeing blocking major highways in central Israel today after the first round of army enlistment orders to religious Jews were sent out today. Now, on Friday, Israel's new defense minister, Israel Katz, approved the issuance of 7,000 enlistment orders to ultra-Orthodox Israelis. The decision had already been made by former defense minister Yoav Gallant just a day before he was fired by Prime Minister Netanyahu earlier this month. And it was expected that Katz would somehow find a way to cancel the order, given that the dispute over the ultra-Orthodox community serving in the military is one of the most contentious in Israel. The Haredi religious and political leadership fiercely resists any effort to draft young men. So, all right, Dan, I'm going to turn to you first here because I just kind of want you to break this down for our viewers. Why is this draft so controversial, especially amidst this ongoing war?
Well, the army is missing tens of thousands of soldiers. And as a consequence of that, reservists have been called for duty of 200 days a year and more in the past year. It's completely ridiculous. But this is a long-standing dispute in Israel. The Haredi minority doesn't want to serve in the army. And that might have been tolerable when they were 2%, 4%, 6% of the population. Their argument is that their young men must study Torah dawn to dusk, and that's just all there is to it, and they can't be distracted. And if you want to study computer science, that's a privilege. They have a duty to study Torah. So not everyone in Israel accepts this, but again, if they're a small minority, maybe it can be tolerated. The Haredim currently are about 1/6 of the country. They're having 7 kids apiece. This is not stopping, and they're desperate to have not much attrition. So if they're going to be 1/3 of the country in one generation, a majority in 2 generations, it cannot be that they don't serve in the army, nor much serve in the workforce either. The Haredi men have a very, very low participation rate of around 50%, and a lot of that is make work. So it's a huge problem. The Haredim have control over this coalition. They threaten to bring it down if this goes on.
Right.
Why did Katz do it? Well, the Supreme Court demands it, and he'd be in violation of the law. The Attorney General has made clear she wouldn't defend an effort to flout the Supreme Court in this case. There is no law mandating their exception. They're trying to pass such a law, and Gallant's opposition to it is one reason why he was fired. But mainly for Katz, the fact is, if there's one issue in the public, where the Likud position is overwhelmingly unpopular. Well, there's a bunch now, but the main one is that they are somehow in cahoots with the Haredim to maintain the scam.
All right. So, Relik, what I want to ask you now is, in regards to these draft orders that have just been handed out, what comes next for the draftees, and what happens if they refuse to enlist? We're obviously already seeing, many take to the streets right now.
So let's just get back a little bit. 1977. Up to that time, the agreement was that 400 super intelligent Haredim will study, and all the rest will enlist. And that worked well until 1977, when Begin needed the Haredi political support and backing, and so he actually opened the anybody who wants to study can study. He wasn't aware of the repercussions within a couple of generations to where we are right now. So Israel Katz is in a position that he hasn't established trust between himself and the military commanders.
Right.
And this is the dividing line where they're putting a lot of pressure on him. So is he going to be against the military in something that is so important for Israel? He's not a fool. So he's putting out those drafts. If the Haredis do not come forward and enlist, they stand to lose not only their allocations, but also be draft dodgers. And draft dodgers within Israel suffer all kinds of limitations, and that remains to be seen.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you both for joining us. Really fascinating to hear your takes on this subject. We're out for a quick break. We'll be back shortly.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. Booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
I'm Natasha Kirchek, and thanks for sticking with us here on Middle East Now. Well, the mother of Israeli hostage Matan Zangauker is slamming the Israeli prime minister and his government after it was revealed that one of his spokesmen is accused of leaking a classified IDF document to the foreign press in a bid to bypass the military censor and influence public opinion against a deal to free the remaining hostages being held captive in the Gaza Strip by Hamas and the PIJ. Now, her comments come after a gag order was released on the details of the case, which reveal that highly sensitive documents were leaked to the German tabloid newspaper Bild in September, giving the impression that protests demanding the release of hostages from Gaza were ultimately strengthening Hamas. Well, joining us now from the Tel Aviv military headquarters is our correspondent, Zach Anders. Zach, explain what these documents said and why they are so controversial and have caused so much anger amongst the families of the hostages.
Well, more or less, the issue at play here, the IDF is alleging, is that these documents should never have been leaked in the first place, that not only were they providing support for this angle or the stance that was trying to be put out there, allegedly by this suspect, the focus of the investigation, but that the documents themselves still contained highly classified material. Today, with the lifting of the gag order by the judiciary here, allows for some new details to come to light, that the investigation itself was brought about by IDF Chief of Staff Herzog, that he ordered the investigation into this leak in the first place, tracing it back to the Prime Minister's office. Now, all of the documents and the current investigation right now is not highlighting or pointing directly to the Prime Minister by name, but certainly with the number of suspects involved and them being part of the Prime Minister's office, certainly raising several red flags there. Where these documents come to some conclusions that essentially the effort here, or the angle, is that the Prime Minister's office is not the one that was a barrier to a deal. And again, think back to the timeline here. These leaked documents coming in the end of August, at the moment after those 6 hostages were killed, executed, as the IDF was potentially closing in for a rescue. That's when these documents are released. The protests at that time, the amount of pressure on the Prime Minister's office to try and get a deal was intense. And then these leaked documents come out alleging that the protests themselves, pressuring the Israeli government, pressuring the Prime Minister's office, was in fact strengthening Hamas's position at the bargaining table and undercutting the Prime Minister's ability to create a deal. So there's some interesting elements here, one of those being that this was leaked to a foreign media outlet. The gag order being lifted today alleges that it was this central suspect attempting to get it to the Israeli press first. There was some form of roadblock or some mechanism that made it very difficult for the central suspect to leak these documents to the Israeli press first. So they went to the foreign press in this German tabloid. And then circled back once these details were leaked and in the international media, then circling back to the Israeli media and trying to get them to cover it and cover these details through what had already been reported by this German tabloid, Natasha.
Now, where do hostage release negotiations stand at this point?
Certainly stalled. We are hearing on a background from sources that there's still a concerted effort by the same figures involved, but the U.S. election and the new incoming administration officials with President-elect Trump are going to certainly look different here. And one of the interesting elements that we've just seen hit the wires out of a Saudi outlet reporting that Hamas is alleging to this Saudi channel that they have lost contact with their own internal mechanism, the men responsible, these terrorists who hold the hostages, that Hamas alleging that they have been disconnected from whatever apparatus they have internally to hold these hostages and hide them somewhere so that they're out of reach and far away from Israeli rescue forces. Hamas now alleging that they've lost contact for a month with the men that are holding these hostages, which of course could certainly be Hamas attempting to play a psychological game here, but them speaking directly to these Saudi sources that they don't have contact with those responsible for holding the hostages.
All right, Zach Anders, thank you so much for joining us with that update from Tel Aviv. We are turning now to Kfar Aza. The Hatzirim neighborhood, specifically of Kibbutz Kfar Aza, was one of the hardest hit communities in the brutal Hamas assault on southern Israel on October 7th. For a year, that community has stood in silent, mute testimony to the horrors of the Black Saturday. But now there are new sounds ringing in the area, the noises of construction and renovation, and the thousands of volunteers who have responded to the call of the Brothers in Arms organization to come and rehabilitate the neighborhood. Take a look.
Okay, good morning. I'm giving a morning briefing. One team is going to clear, one team is with me here in the excavations. If there's a siren, each unit here has a safe room. Enter it, close the window, close the door. We'll meet here at 8:30.
Kibbutz Kfar Aza, the Tzirim neighborhood, one of the symbols of tragedy, the first line of the horror of October 7. A year later, the same place, but a new name. The Green Floors neighborhood, an initiative of the Brothers in Arms organization carried out by Israeli citizens.
This project, first of all, begins with the inspiration of Omri Ronan, whose grandmother was murdered along with her caregiver 50 meters from us in the safe room on October 7th. And we decided it's time to start the wheels moving and make a change here and start building. There are 16 housing units here that we are starting to renovate, repair, build them from A to Z. Let me show you. What we envisage, the kitchen will be here, the bathing area here, shower, clothes dryer and a washing machine, toilet, refrigerator.
Listen, it sounds like work for professionals. So who actually...
In the early days, there were more than 3,000 people who volunteered, wanted to come, including professionals, including suppliers. There are electricians here, plumbers who come on time with an organized Excel file of their work schedule. They give their time and their heart to the work, and it's heartwarming.
They come from all over the country, from all political camps, all communities, and everything that separates us. Here they don't ask who you voted for or who's to blame for all this. Instead they ask what needs to be done and when can I come again?
Seeing this group of people, seeing their eyes, is really very encouraging.
I am a lawyer. I came to the kitchen. I was told that cooks were needed today to prepare food for all the volunteers. But when I arrived, they sent me to help with manual labor.
I am a biomedical engineer, and where there is a vacuum, I try to enter it to try to see what I can do with the little I have.
Exactly what we're doing here today this week. That's exactly what I came for.
Wow! What did you prepare for them today?
It's chicken meatballs with potatoes and lots of green spices.
She came to me yesterday and said, "Come on, we're going to cook for 100 or so mouths in Kfar Aza." I said I'll come check what's going on here, and then I will see which day. And by noon, I had already become the person in charge of the meals.
We are busy assembling cranes, renovating. We closed the company today. No one is working today, including our finance manager, who knows nothing but writing, has come to work.
We are stripping these buildings and renovating them from the ground up, including the outside. We are simply building a neighborhood, and we are building as a community. To bring a community back here, we are starting a process here of resurrection and renewal in one of the free kibbutzim where they snatched the most people.
It's the grass, it's the pergolas, it's to connect to the kibbutz, to understand the kibbutz days, when the kibbutz was still whole with all that passed through it. This is a huge privilege for us.
You sit at home, you watch the news, the heart cries, the soul shrieks, and you want to do something.
My son fought here on October the 7th, and when I heard, I said I had to come to see where he went and what he did. And also to feel that I am doing something for the revival of our country, for these amazing people here.
For me, the food and cooking for others, right now it gives me the opportunity to breathe.
I felt that after October 7th, I really couldn't help. And I felt as an Israeli that it was simple. It was not my place to stay there.
I feel I can't do otherwise. From October 8th, I feel that that's the meaning. It's a bit difficult for me. This disconnection, trying to get back to life the way it was, they won't be able to go back to what they were. I'm trying to help, do what I can.
These are my brothers. And by the way, when I say these are my brothers, it doesn't matter who. If they're human, they're my brothers. It doesn't matter what happened and how it happened and why it happened. If there's a person in distress, you try to help.
My little brother, Captain Eli Zisser, the commander of the Zisser team in the Sayeret Makal unit. On the morning of October 7th, he was one of the first to enter here. Beyond the contribution I feel and want to make specifically in this place, the place where Eli was eventually killed, I feel like I have something more inside, a mission, something else to continue his path.
I know this will sound psychotic, but this volunteering fills my heart. I'm crying now.
Last year, we had a lot of volunteers here. You talk to them. Volunteering is back to how it used to be, from the heart. It ignites a great deal of excitement. It's a flame. It's an eye-opener. It brings tears sometimes, too. If we are real and honest and not cowards.
This is a time when we mainly meet in cemeteries, from memorial to memorial. All these days, wherever we met, that's what we talked about, that there are people in the dining room. So you know that it's touching.
The echoes of war are swallowed up here in the voices of rebuilding. They don't just build houses here. New rooms for the heart are also being built here.
Eventually, families will return here, build houses here. There will be children here who will laugh about it. The lawns provide a lot of strength. We'll continue our way.
Every time I come home from here, I play cool songs in the car. It's an hour or so drive and a real feeling of fulfillment, of hope.
Everyone who works feels that they are part of the history of the State of Israel, which, in my opinion, is the most important thing. When you want to start healing and restoring the country, it starts with action. It starts here.
All right, we are turning to a very, very different topic right now. Controversy is erupting in Saudi Arabia over a fashion show. Riyadh just hosted a major fashion show for one of the region's most celebrated designers, suggesting that progressive changes are slowly but surely being made in Saudi Arabia's conservative society. That is because scantily dressed models, including pop star J-Lo herself, paraded their stuff down the runway with a backdrop of the Kaaba, which is a highly valued and sacred site in Islam. Well, the Muslim internet is exploding with anger over the display, calling it disrespectful to Islam. And here's a look at what the fashion show had on display.
Amid the regional distress going on in the Middle East, some countries are taking on new endeavors with a glimmer of glamour. Saudi Arabia hosted a fashion show by celebrated Lebanese designer Elie Saab in its capital, Riyadh. The show, called 1001 Seasons of Elie Saab, brought a star-studded crowd not only to model his designs, but also to attend the show. An event that wouldn't necessarily happen in a different Saudi Arabia, the kingdom has been using a subtle cultural diplomacy to reinvent itself.
I cannot be more proud of what's happening now in Riyadh and Saudi Arabia overall. I mean, look at this. Look at the beautiful names we have here in the middle of Riyadh.
There is a lot of harmony with the idea of evolution that is taking place in Riyadh, in terms of being up to date to art and culture. Having someone as important as Elie Saab fits extremely well as part of the beautiful Riyadh season that cares for art and culture.
Notably, Saab's 45-year anniversary show took place in Saudi Arabia and not in Lebanon, where the designer is originally from. Plagued by Israel's war on Hezbollah and by a dire economic and social situation before that, Lebanese showed they were happy to represent their country in a different light, even if somewhere else.
I'm very excited to be here. We're going through many difficulties back home. And I feel like one of the ways that we can win is by continuing to succeed and represent our country at home and abroad. So I'm very happy to be here tonight and to represent my country.
This is my first time in Riyadh, so I'm happy to be here attending Elie Saab's fashion show, this world-class designer. It's not easy for someone from Lebanon to be world famous. I'm very happy for him.
I'm very happy for him.
Of all the celebrities in the fashion show's lineup, the standouts were Celine Dion's performance, only her second in the last couple of years, along with global superstar Jennifer Lopez's performance. In a nod to the designer, Hollywood actress Halle Berry also graced the podium wearing the same dress she wore to the Oscars in 2002, when she became the first black woman to win the Best Actress Oscar. Despite the loss and suffering coming out of the Middle East right now, small cultural wins are still taking place, but just in different ways.
Well, joining us now is our Dubai correspondent, Bastien Bory. So, Bastien, explain the controversy over this fashion show. Obviously, what we just saw was kind of a beautiful collection of images from the show itself. J-Lo is apparently even being snubbed by some major sheikhs over this show. Give us the background here.
First, I don't think there's any point in commenting or echoing the netizens or the social media users who have expressed themselves for or against this concert. I mean, Jennifer Lopez dresses as she pleases. The only interesting thing maybe we can say is that there is obviously a political message behind the invitation by the Saudi authorities to Jennifer Lopez to come and take part in this concert. From a very general standpoint, if we look at the bigger picture in Saudi Arabia, dress regulations have been somewhat relaxed in the country in recent years, and women, whether Saudi nationals or expatriates, are no longer required to wear this long dress or this abaya in public. That said, they still can't wear short pants or tight-fitting, revealing clothes, and obviously this rule does not apply to certain celebrities, as we saw this weekend. There's a kind of laissez-faire attitude that the Saudi authorities are playing with precisely to attract well-known artists and singers in particular. Today we're talking about Jennifer Lopez, but a few months ago, Iggy Azalea was also dressed pretty much the same way on stage. There was some kind of confusion at the beginning of the concert on the part of the police, who we learned was even thinking about putting a stop to her performance, which shows that there's sometimes poor communication between the different authorities and departments within Saudi Arabia. What's for sure is that in this kind of occurrence, the authorities seek to avoid any upheaval, especially in the audience, who in Saudi Arabia is increasingly young and open-minded, and who can use social media to show its displeasure with any overly conservative police actions. And that's what we're witnessing today. The government is on mute mode, as they don't want to provoke any reaction from Jennifer Lopez, from the artists themselves in general, who are, as you know, massively followed and listened to.
All right, Bastien, thank you for that insight. Obviously, very interesting to kind of see the conversations coming up on the internet following this major show. And I'm sure that we're going to have stories down the line that are similar with you. All right, we are turning now to Egypt. After a year's hiatus, the Cairo International Film Festival opened on Wednesday evening with some of the biggest stars in the region lining the red carpet in Africa's largest film festival. But this year's festival is being held in the shadow of the Israel-Hamas war, with Palestinian films taking the spotlight and a clear message towards neighbors in Israel. Our Joe Brown has the story.
The 45th Cairo International Film Festival opened its doors on Wednesday, and over the next week, almost 200 films will be shown, displaying the best cinema that the Middle East, North Africa, and the whole world has to offer. But amidst all the glitz and glamour, one topic is prevalent on the minds and the screens of the festival.
We have, I don't know the exact number, maybe 4 or 5 Palestinian films. Our opening film is a Palestinian film. We have a film comprised of 22 short films that were filmed in Gaza. And the people of Gaza are the ones who filmed them, using their mobile phones about the reality of their lives.
Normally held annually, last year's film festival was cancelled in solidarity with the people of Gaza. And this year, actors, actresses and directors made their feelings known, many of them wearing Palestinian pins and using their platform to condemn Israel's actions both in Gaza and in Lebanon.
The situation in Lebanon is very bad, as is the Palestinian situation and what is happening in Gaza. And because of this, the last Cairo Film Festival was postponed, and therefore we support the Palestinian people and the Lebanese people.
We are speaking about more than 400 days and the whole world can't stop the war in Gaza. We are talking about more than 50,000 martyrs and thousands under the rubble, plus 1.5 million refugees in Gaza moving from one place to another. This is too tough. And for us as filmmakers, it is important to document that through cinematic language.
The war also has an economic cost for the festival, as all sponsors with links to Israel were boycotted, meaning only local sponsors, such as Egypt Air, funded the event. But despite this, 73 countries submitted films to the festival, making up for the lack of an event in 2023.
Well, it's official. Israeli President Isaac Herzog has canceled his planned visit to the UN's COP29 climate conference in Azerbaijan over security concerns. Israel's delegation is already taking place under tight security given the country's proximity to Iran, though Azerbaijan itself is seen as an ally of Israel. But a news website from Azerbaijan is claiming that the real reason President Isaac Herzog canceled his visit to the climate is because of Turkey's refusal to allow Herzog's plane to actually fly in its airspace on the way to the meeting. Well, joining us now is Fuad Shabazov, a security consultant at the Caliber MMC company. So first of all, what are the security concerns that the Israeli delegation is facing in Azerbaijan throughout this conference?
As you may know, the main concern, if you're talking about the South Caucasus or from the angle of Azerbaijan-Israel partnership or alliance, the main source of threat was, of course, traditionally considered Iran or pro-Iranian linked proxies or organizations or even some individuals. And in this case, considering the COP29 is one of the highest level UN events that usually annually takes place around the globe. And this year, Azerbaijan became one of those rare countries, small countries that hosting this unique event with dozens of European political leaders, very well-known figures or diplomats attending this event in Baku. And just as a regular schedule, just like other country leaders, President Herzog was supposed to be present at the event tomorrow, but today the Israeli government confirmed that President Herzog will not attend. He will probably skip this event, citing some security concerns, but of course not specifying what kind of security concerns are on the ground
Right.
that prevent President Herzog to attend this COP29. Since a few days ago we had here the UK Prime Minister or President of Finland, Prime Minister of Italy attending this event, but even though we are now missing President Herzog. Although Israeli media mentioned that it was Turkey that did not allow President Herzog's plane to use its airspace to reach Azerbaijan, which was denied by Turkish state media like 20 or 30 minutes ago that I checked. That Turkish government say that there was no such a request from Israeli side that President Herzog wants to use Turkish airspace to reach Baku. But in this case, this is a very familiar case for Azerbaijan because in early 20s, in early 2000s, when the former president of Israel, Shimon Peres, was supposed to visit Baku, and for the same reason. And if you remember, there was an attempt by Iranian proxy, which named the Hezbollah members, some just traveling to Azerbaijan, and were trying to perpetrate a kind of terror attack during the time when Shimon Peres' plane was supposed to land in Azerbaijan. So and thanks to because of Azerbaijan Security Service was prevented.
I'm going to have to cut you off because we're going out for a commercial break, but thank you for that update. We're turning to the rundown now.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. Booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are?
Introducing I-24 News' brand new news website.
On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it.
So what are you waiting for? Download the I-24 News app today.
The rundown on I24 News. I'm Benita Levine. Thank you for joining us. Israeli airstrikes on terror targets in central Beirut have intensified, with the IDF confirming just moments ago it's been targeting sites in the Lebanese capital once again. Earlier in the day, reports that Hezbollah's media chief, Mohammed Afif, is the latest senior member of the terror group to have been eliminated. The Israeli military saying its attacks have been directed at Hezbollah's infrastructure, including a weapons storage facility and a command center. For more than a year now, Hezbollah has been launching regular rocket and drone attacks out of Lebanon towards residential parts of northern Israel, all in support of Hamas in Gaza since the day after the Hamas terror rampage and mass abduction in southern Israel on the 7th of October. Efforts to secure a ceasefire have so far been unsuccessful. IDF Chief Herzi Halevi vowing to keep fighting against Hezbollah until residents evacuated from the north can go back to their homes. More in this report by our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osaran.
Ceasefire talks or no talks, Israel continues to target senior Hezbollah officials. In a rare airstrike in central Beirut and with no prior warning, the IDF eliminated Hezbollah's spokesperson, Mohammed Afif.
The Israeli enemy targets civilian buildings to pressure the resistance and to divert attention from its own defeat, and also to weaken the steadfastness of our fighters.
Less than a month ago, Afif had to cut short a press conference in Beirut's southern suburb after the IDF issued an evacuation warning for the area. Throughout Sunday, the IDF continued to strike from the air Hezbollah targets across Lebanon, in the southern villages, the Bekaa Valley, and Beirut's southern suburbs. On the ground, Israeli forces deepen their operation in southern Lebanon and uncover Hezbollah weapon sites as ceasefire talks gain further steam.
Hezbollah has paid a big price. Its chain of command has collapsed. Many of its operatives have been killed and extensive infrastructure dismantled. If they continue to fire, we will continue to fight, to implement plans, to go further, conduct deep strikes, and hit Hezbollah very hard. We will stop when we know that we are bringing back the residents of northern Israel in safety.
Meanwhile, Hezbollah launched dozens of rockets into northern Israel, likely injuring 2 people. This comes a day after a heavy barrage directly hit a synagogue in Haifa, northern Israel's largest city, injuring 2 civilians.
This is an everyday synagogue, and this is the place where we study. And the other building is the main synagogue. And they are both completely destroyed, but we are very happy that no one was inside.
According to reports, Hezbollah received the American ceasefire proposal and is planning its response. Until then, Israel will further intensify its military pressure, continuing to strike Hezbollah across Lebanon.
So for more on the ground, we go live to our correspondent Nicole Zedek. She joins us from Haifa in northern Israel. And as we heard there in Ariel's report, we know Hezbollah has been targeting the port city of Haifa with regular rocket and drone attacks during this war. On Saturday, hitting that synagogue. And now, just moments ago, we're hearing the IDF saying it's conducting more strikes in Beirut. Bring us up to speed. What is the latest?
Yes, I'll start on this northern Israeli side, Benita, because as of the latest sirens that sounded about an hour ago in Rosh HaNikra, which is just north of where we are here in Haifa, the IDF says that they shot down 3 drones launched from Lebanon towards the western Galilee area. Those sirens sounded out of fear of shrapnel from the interceptions there. And earlier in the day before that, a little bit more eastwards towards the town of Matat and the surrounding area, sirens sounded there as well, following a barrage of 15 rockets launched towards that area. 1 person was lightly wounded in that barrage and several others treated for anxiety attacks. But that's really the most of what we've seen so far today on the northern front. Deep inside Lebanon, that's where we're really seeing the action so far.
And we will be coming back to our correspondent Nicole Zedek for more updates in the coming hours. For now, thank you, Nicole. And for more insight, we now welcome to studio Yaakov Lapin, host of the podcast The Lapin Assessment on Patreon and a military and strategic affairs analyst at the Miriam Institute and the Jewish News Syndicate. And our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Oseran. Thank you both so much for being here. Beirut is where we're starting. I'm coming straight to you, Yaakov, because just moments before we started this broadcast, the IDF confirming more strikes on terror sites in the Lebanese capital. Bring us up to speed, your insights and assessment on what's going on right now.
Right. Well, according to some reports, Mohammed Afif, who was targeted earlier, the head of propaganda for Hezbollah, was not only head of propaganda, he also held a military operational role to help fill some of that vacuum that has been left by a series of devastating assassinations that Israel has conducted against Hezbollah in recent months. But at the end of the day, what I think we're seeing is Israel, the Israeli Air Force, the Military Intelligence Directorate, applying maximum pressure on Hezbollah in its most sensitive spot, which is Beirut, where so much of its command and control is located, where it's trying to rebuild itself and to signal to the world, together with their Iranian patrons, that they are able to continue this war. And they are to a certain degree, but hitting them in Beirut is really the most maximum amount of pressure I think Israel can apply. And I think this is designed to try and get them to agree sooner rather than later to the ceasefire arrangement that the Americans are drawing up as we speak. I think the state of Lebanon, the Lebanese government, are interested in signing that, but they need Hezbollah's approval to do so. And until that approval comes, I think we're going to see this pressure continue. And basically, I think, the Israeli defense establishment is signaling to Hezbollah. They're saying, look, if you think we ran out of targets, if you think we can't keep up this momentum, you're wrong. We can continue this for as long as is necessary. I think that's the message that's being sent to whatever's left of Hezbollah's leadership, Naim Qassem and his friends.
Israeli troops, meanwhile, said to have reached the deepest point in Lebanon since the ground operation began, Ariel, and there's no idea of the timeframes involved here. This limited operation is clearly getting larger and larger.
Look, just like Israel wants to decouple Gaza ceasefire negotiations and Lebanon ceasefire negotiations, we're seeing so far two parallel routes of Israel's military operation against Hezbollah and its diplomatic efforts to reach a ceasefire, and that the two are not connected, at least according to what we're seeing on the ground. We're seeing Israeli forces entering new villages deeper inside Lebanon, villages that they have not operated in before. It's important to remember, though, what the forces are doing, they're not conquering these villages. They're going in, conducting raids to eliminate Hezbollah operatives and dismantle Hezbollah terror infrastructure, whether it's underground sites or launch pads or weapons storage facilities. That's what the forces are doing now. But if we're looking at this strike in the center of Beirut, the second today, and not in the Dakhia just a few moments ago, so Lebanese media reporting that the target of a airstrike on a car in central Beirut, the Mar Elias area, not the stronghold of Hezbollah in the southern suburb, was Muhammad Takush. He's the head of Jamaat al-Islamiyah, the Islamist group. That they're a Sunni militia in Lebanon that have joined forces, so to speak, with Shiite Hezbollah in its attacks against Israel. We've seen multiple launches by this terror group, and also multiple targeting of its operatives by Israel. So according to this latest reporting coming out of Lebanon, Israel targeted the Secretary General, the head of this Sunni terror militia, again, not in Beirut's southern suburb, showing that Israel is continuing its strikes across Lebanon, regardless of what the diplomatic avenue indicates, with Hochstein expected to arrive, the special U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein expected to arrive in Lebanon on Tuesday, and then he will continue to Israel the following day to further discuss this American proposal and get Hezbollah's response to it.
Certainly will be fascinating to see Amos Hochstein here once again in the region on Tuesday. He's been here many times throughout this war. Gentlemen, stay with us. Much more to discuss on the security front right now. An update Out of Gaza, 3 more Israeli soldiers killed in fighting in the northern Gaza Strip. The IDF confirming a short while ago 22-year-old Captain Yogev Pazi from Givot Bar, a platoon commander in the Nachshon Battalion of Kfir Brigade, and 21-year-old Staff Sergeant Noam Eitan from Khedera were killed defending the country. And earlier today, confirmation that Sergeant First Class in the Reserves Idan Kanan from Ramat Gan was killed by sniper fire on Saturday in northern Gaza's Beit Lahia. This brings the Israeli death toll in the IDF retaliatory operation in Gaza to 376. And a devastating personal loss for former Defense Minister Gadi Eisenkot. Captain Yogev Pazi was his nephew, and Eisenkot's son Gal was killed in fighting in Gaza back in December. Tragic indeed. Now, seal the deal and do it quickly. That's a clear message once again from families of some of the hostages still held in Gaza. Protesters gathering in Tel Aviv overnight, also highlighting the plight of the younger hostages ahead of International Children's Day, which is on Wednesday this week. At the same time, the Al Arabi Al Jadid newspaper, which is run by Qatar, is today reporting that there has been no communication with Hamas commanders responsible for holding the hostages for about a month now. Take a listen to some of the families of the hostages.
There is no more time. We are not waiting for a new president in the United States. We are not waiting for time to pass. We need agreements now. The world needs to act. My brother and 100 hostages need to come home. I hope my brother is alive. He needs to come home to start rebuilding his life. All of the hostages need to come home.
President Trump, please, we need you to step in and take charge of the situation today. As you know, Benjamin Netanyahu refuses to put an end to the war in Gaza. Please, do everything in your power to end this war and to bring all the hostages, including the 6 American hostages, back home. The hostages will not survive the winter. They won't even survive till your inauguration in January. Please, save our hostages. They need you to act now.
An impassioned appeal indeed. And a quick correction on that earlier story. Gadi Eisenkot was, of course, the former IDF Chief of Staff. And condolences once again to his family. Now we go live to our correspondent, Zach Anders. He joins us from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. And Zach, we just heard their relatives of some of the hostages pleading for a deal that sees their loved ones coming back home. At the same time, we know Benjamin Netanyahu is holding a meeting at IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv. Talk us through efforts right now to put pressure on Hamas to free the hostages, day 408 of the war.
You know, when we first saw the screen here in Hostage Square be set up and it was a running timer, it gives the days, the hours, the minutes, the seconds. I think the first day it went up was day 30. And now, as I look over at the edge of Hostage Square, it's day 408. On this screen, it says 407. One of the remarkable elements of, as these moments come and pass and we still are waiting for some change, some form of a new deal. Remember, the last political deal that was achieved is almost exactly a year old, last November. So where things stand presently, Channel 13 here in Israel reporting that the Security Cabinet will meet here tonight. We believe we've already seen some VIPs arrive here to the Kiryat in motorcades within the last hour. What exactly is being discussed? Well, Channel 13 is claiming that the Mossad director, David Barnea, is presenting a new framework, a new outline. Certainly that is going to raise some eyebrows based on conversations I've had with the families. Anytime that they hear about there's something new or there's a different approach to them, that feels like foregoing a lot of the progress that has been made, and is a bit worrisome to know that there is a potential here that whatever has been moved behind the scenes, diplomatically, politically, to try and get some daylight on a deal, to try and achieve some sort of progress over the last several months, to hear of a new approach certainly is another adds to an already long list of stressors for these families who are ready to and pushing forward accepting a deal at all but any cost. So we'll pay close attention to that tonight to see if there's any outcome of this meeting, Benita, that's taking place. But again, we report to you this a nearly weekly dance that the Security Cabinet says that the Prime Minister and other officials are going to be meeting in the Kyria Sunday night to discuss hostage negotiations, and we don't get much more out of that. And it's been this wash and repeat cycle now for months.
And time is of the essence as we keep on hearing from all the families of the hostages that we speak to. Meanwhile, Zach, investigations underway after an unusual incident, flares fired at Benjamin Netanyahu's private residence in Caesarea. 3 people arrested early this morning. Bring us up to speed on that. Investigators saying this marks potentially a dangerous escalation.
Well, it certainly marks a form of escalation. I mean, the protesters that we've been in the mix with for, also the last several months as these protests have been taking place with a bit more intensity. Certainly, the Tel Aviv protests capture the attention of the TV cameras. But the protests up north in Caesarea, outside of the Prime Minister's residence, they have been picking up steam and intensity of late. Which is interesting because the Prime Minister's schedule not made public. It's not made public when he returns to that private residence along the beach there. But the element here that of different officials coming out and saying that this marks an escalation, I thought one of the more interesting points here is the now fired Defense Minister Gallant. Even he released a statement saying that these firing of these flares, the same sort of flares you would see at football matches that burn bright and hot for a long time, create a lot of smoke. Even the now fired defense minister saying that this was crossing a line. So even if you would make your own assessment that you would think there would be no love lost right now between Yoav Gallant having been fired by Prime Minister Netanyahu, still, it does seem that this has caught the attention of those within the security apparatus, even the former those who have left, who recognize that the anger, the angst of these crowds is certainly, it's been there for a while, but the approaches and the tactics of the crowd seems, since they've been hitting a wall for so long and nothing's been getting done, that the crowd, the mentality, the movement there has changed a bit. I still wouldn't call these protests violent, just based on having been at actual violent protests. These are still rather subdued, but employing these other measures, launching a flare over a fence and the potential for it to spark a fire, that's certainly a concern.
Certainly concerning indeed. Thank you so much for now. That is our correspondent, Zach Anders, live from Tel Aviv. Thank you, Zach. And still in studio, Yaakov Lapin, host of the podcast, The Lapin Assessment on Patreon, and our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osaran. And I want to start with the hostages and these apparent discussions with David Barnea, the Mossad chief, in the Kyria, in the IDF headquarters. It comes shortly after we heard these reports that there has been no contact with Hamas commanders for the past month within Gaza, which is hugely concerning, although these are just reports. Your take?
Well, I think, there are a few things going on here at the same time. First of all, Hamas as a centralized terror army has largely been disbanded. And what that means is that Mohammed Sinwar and his inner circle, those who are attempting to recreate some kind of centralized command in Gaza, are running into great difficulties. And that's by design. That's what the IDF wants. It doesn't want them to be able to communicate with field operatives, et cetera, et cetera. So that could explain some of the difficulty in their communication abilities. But, regarding the hostage talks, and we see the Shin Bet is involved in this as well, a lot of the former senior officials who have called on Netanyahu to go further, they are creating, their pressure together with the hostage families. But at the end of the day, Hamas, even after the elimination of Sinwar, has stuck to its position, and it's calling for the IDF to leave the Gaza Strip, to release many, many convicted terrorists and mass murderers, and to agree to a long, long ceasefire. And the Israeli cabinet is not prepared to agree to that. It does not think that that is a deal that's going to serve Israel's security. So the question is, what are they discussing? If that's a no-go, what are they discussing? We don't know yet. I do hope that the first people that will find out outside of that circle will be the hostage families themselves. I've been saying for a long time that I think they should know long before the public about things going on behind the scenes that affect their loved ones. But we will have to be patient and see what's up for discussion.
At the same time, Al Arabi Al Jadid, the newspaper, is reporting that the only way to save the remaining living hostages is through a negotiated agreement for their release that would include a ceasefire. That is quoting a source to the newspaper. Ariel, it doesn't augur well for a deal soon.
Yeah, that quote goes so far as to say that the only way to secure the safe release of the hostages is to accept Hamas's demands. And that's not surprising that this is coming from a Qatari newspaper. But in fact, following that report, there was a denial by Hamas of the fact that there is no contact, saying that the cessation of contact with officials in Gaza overseeing the hostages is due to strict security measures put in place to ensure the preservation of an important bargaining chip. Now, we have heard in the past that there were strict communication limitations in Gaza, and I'm sure that exacerbated following the killing of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. But at the end of the day, we're seeing some sort of disconnect between Hamas and Gaza, Hamas in Qatar, and now, according to reporting in Israel's public broadcast, Khan, some, not all, but some of Hamas leadership in Qatar has left to Turkey, because we know, at least according to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, that Qatar had informed Hamas leadership that it's time to leave, that they cannot stay in Qatar. Turkey was one of the options that we even discussed here in this studio as a leading option, given the close, the affinity to the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas there, perhaps trying to increase its Turkey's patronage over Hamas. At the end of the day, we are seeing no movement in terms of the negotiations. There is an Israeli attempt, at least on the part of the Israeli mediators, to present a new proposal. But if we're looking at the situation on the ground, the operation in northern Gaza is continuing, also in the south. And according to the steps that the IDF engineering steps is carrying out on the ground, they're preparing for an extended stay. Haaretz reported last week that it's expected to be until end of next year. And so there is some discrepancy between what the IDF is doing on the ground and the hopes for a ceasefire. But this also comes as Hamas continues to regroup, just finished second batch of recruitment to fill in the ranks following the successful IDF operation to degrade its military capabilities. But as we know, Hamas is not going anywhere. And again, in the absence of an alternative to Hamas's civil leadership inside the Gaza Strip, they're here to stay and they're not going anywhere. And that's how they're treating the situation as well.
Yaakov, what do you make of the role that the U.S. could be playing right now? And obviously timing is of the essence. The Biden administration would like nothing better than to secure some kind of a deal before their swan song, so to speak, before they leave the White House. And of course, there's also pressure on Donald Trump, but he only gets to the White House on the 20th of January. What could be happening behind the scenes to put pressure on Hamas to let the hostages come home where they belong?
So, I think that, first of all, what Qatar is doing, applying more pressure, on Hamas, part of that is coming in from the Biden administration, and part of that, I think, is already coming from the Trump 2.0 administration. I think the Qataris are responding and preempting what they see will be a change in American position and possibly a much harsher American position towards them and their willingness to host Hamas for so many years in luxurious hotels. I don't think that's going to look very good in the eyes of this new American administration, and they could be therefore preempting by basically telling the Hamas leaders on their soil, look, you have to do better, and if not, you're going to have to leave. So I think that's one thing that's happening, and that sort of as a chain reaction is definitely going to be applying more pressure on Hamas. The question is, will it be enough pressure to change their bargaining position? So far, the answer has unfortunately been no. So I think that, the Biden administration in its last sort of 6 weeks, 2 months, it's trying to, seal deals, including with Saudi Arabia. It's trying to add pressure to Hamas. But I think it's very limited what they can do. Everybody knows that they're about to vanish and they're going to be replaced. And as a result, I think everybody's looking towards the new appointees, what they're saying. I'm sure that there's a lot of meetings and communications behind the scenes, behind closed doors, to find out, what exactly this new administration will want. And I think Hamas is also waiting to see how it's going to be affected by this elections result in the United States. So I think, in classic Middle Eastern terms, people are hedging their bets, various actors, and waiting to see what will happen next.
The problem, of course, is that in the 2 months it takes for the new administration to get into the Oval Office, so to speak, that is crucial time for the hostages. And those hostages, Ariel, briefly include Americans as well. Every day that passes is crucial for the longevity of the hostages. Their families are warning that they won't be able to survive this winter. There's those who did survive the previous winter. They're saying that there was a miracle at the end of the day. Over 400 days in captivity, some in tunnels, some not. Again, we don't know the situation of all of them. Every moment counts, and the united front that the heads of Israel's security establishment are presenting to the cabinet this evening is that Hamas is not expected to backtrack on its two main demands, a full end to the war and a full withdrawal. And if Israel wants a deal to get back the hostages, it will need to show some flexibility in those two demands. Ariel, Yaakov, stay with us. Much more to discuss right now. A very quick break. When we get back, our coverage continues with reports that Iran has reportedly given assurances to the U.S. Tehran is not trying to kill Donald Trump. Stay tuned.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. Booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Welcome back to The Rundown. Thank you for staying with us. Now, Iran has reportedly given assurances to the U.S. that Tehran is not trying to kill President-elect Donald Trump as tensions between the two countries continue to grow. Iran has been displaying missiles and defense systems in a new exhibit coming on the heels of a visit from the UN nuclear watchdog chief, Rafael Grossi. Senior correspondent Bianca Zanini has more in this report.
On display, a warning for Israel and the U.S. as tensions between the West and the Islamic Republic of Iran continue to rise. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps showcasing a number of its missile and defense systems, some of them capable of reaching Israel and U.S. bases in the region.
I felt so proud that we have boosted our defensive power to the extent that the aggressors can't even think about attacking us.
The show of force comes as the world awaits an Iranian retaliatory strike on Israel after the IDF targeted military sites in Iran in late October in response to a previous Iranian attack. Tehran has reportedly said they will wait to respond until after U.S. President-elect Donald Trump takes power.
We're going to bring peace. You're going to have peace in the Middle East.
Meanwhile, Trump is expected to reinstate his sanctions-led maximum pressure policy on Tehran to prevent it from acquiring nuclear weapons. Leading up to the weekend, Rafael Grossi, the UN nuclear watchdog chief, visited Tehran in an effort to restart negotiations. But in an interview with Iranian state television, the country's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi said that an opportunity for nuclear diplomacy with the West is limited. Araghchi also addressed reports that Iran's ambassador to the UN held a secret meeting with Trump supporter billionaire Elon Musk, discussing the growing tensions. Araghchi denying any opening of talks.
No, it definitely did not happen. It was simply fabrication by American media.
According to U.S. intelligence, Iran is armed with the largest number of ballistic missiles in the Middle East.
Still in studio, Yaakov Lapin and Ariel Osaran. And I want to start with the Axios report. Yaakov, Israel's airstrikes in Iran last month said to have destroyed an active nuclear weapons research facility in Parchin. Your thoughts, your insights?
Right. So according to this report, what was targeted was a place where they practice a kind of explosive, plastic explosives that's necessary for researching a nuclear detonator and building a nuclear warhead. And this appears to be a signal by the Israeli defense establishment to the Iranians saying, look, we know what you're doing. We know exactly how advanced you are in the nuclear program. We know that you've gone beyond just the enrichment of uranium. So any step you take that's going to cross another line, expect more attacks. And, following on from that report, we have to keep in mind that Iran right now is a country with almost no active air defenses. That means that they're completely vulnerable to future Israeli airstrikes. I think they're aware of that. And behind a lot of that bluster is a lot more cautious thinking. We haven't seen this promised missile attack materialize. Despite days of, vowing of revenge, it hasn't happened. Now Trump and the administration are coming into power in Washington. The Iranians have a lot of reason to be concerned about their nuclear program and other very sensitive strategic sites.
Nonetheless, their proxies are still very much active, and they could be acting on their behalf in terms of that waiting for this apparent response.
Well, 100%. But the problem is for the Iranians is that their most important and powerful proxies are a shadow of their former selves. Hamas is no longer a regional proxy that's relevant to anything. They can't activate Hamas. Hamas right now is the most that it can do is attack the IDF, and it does do that. And Israel pays a painful price for that. But it's been reduced to a guerrilla terror movement. It can't launch massive amounts of rockets at the state of Israel. Hezbollah has also been severely downgraded. So that leaves them with Shiite militias in Syria, Shiite militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen. This is not the grand proxy strategy that the Iranians were building on. So they definitely have a crisis in the proxy part of their strategy. And their ballistic missile program is a lot less menacing than it was before these direct exchanges between Iran and Israel. So what do they have left? It's the nuclear program. That's the jewel now in their crown. That's the thing that Israel is going to be watching very closely. And I think the strike that we were just discussing is a real warning to the Iranians saying, if you decide to break through, you're going to pay a price for that decision.
Are more of the strikes like those ones very likely? And timing would be crucial because of this change in administration.
Yeah, look, I think that, the Iranians are already way too advanced in their nuclear program. And once Trump officially takes power, I think there's going to be a real temptation for Prime Minister Netanyahu to complete the series of steps that he has taken against the Iranians, not only against their proxy program, not only against their ballistic missile program, but to also take that final step and target the nuclear program. I think he will be tempted to do that. Of course, we don't know what will happen. Perhaps the Trump administration will say, let's give maximum pressure and diplomacy a chance. We don't know, but it's going to be a very interesting couple of months. And if I were the Iranians, I would definitely be nervous about my nuclear program.
And also reports emanating out of certain media that the Supreme Leader isn't well. That much is confirmed. The New York Times also saying that he is actually in a coma. Talk to us about the implications given these tensions, not only between Iran and Israel, but Iran and the US right now with an ailing Supreme Leader who, in effect, makes the real decisions.
Yeah, he certainly does, and the timing is bad for the Iranians. On the other hand, they've known that this could happen any day now for a long time. Ayatollah Khamenei is not a young man, and he's suffered a whole string of health issues. So I think the most important question is who's going to replace him. And my hope from an Israeli perspective is that Ayatollah Khamenei and his inner circle and the Supreme National Security Council of Iran make the mistake of appointing somebody like his son, which I assume would create a massive backlash in Iran. It would be seen as a sign of corruption and nepotism. And the less stable the Iranian regime is, the more concerned it is about its internal stability, the better that is, of course, for us in Israel. So this is definitely a vulnerable moment for them. And the fact that Ayatollah Khamenei is unwell, and that has been confirmed, we don't know how unwell, but we know he's unwell, is only going to add to the level of stress that's on that regime right now.
We started this broadcast with the new development just in at the time, the IDF confirming that it was continuing to target certain terrorist sites in Beirut and surrounds, bringing us up to speed with the latest developments, conflicting reports. But what do we know? What are you learning, Ariel Osseran?
We know the Lebanese health ministry confirming that one person was killed and 9 additional people were injured, 2 of them in serious condition in the latest Israeli airstrike in the Mar Elias part of Beirut. That's in central Beirut, not in the southern suburb, the Dahia, the Hezbollah stronghold. That's the official, that's what we know. What we don't know is who was the target. Now, there are conflicting reports. Initial reports came out naming Mohammed Takush, the Secretary General of Al-Jamal Islamiyah, a Sunni militant group that has cooperated with Hezbollah in its strikes against Israel. That has been denied by many media outlets in Lebanon. Others are saying that the target was someone from a leading Shiite group. That's either Hezbollah or Amal, but we still have no confirmation or reportable indication as to who that could be. Obviously, the fact that this strike was not in the Beirut suburb in the south, the Hezbollah stronghold. Usually before those strikes, the IDF issues an evacuation warning. And when they don't do that, that is a sign of a targeted elimination. So we know that there wasn't such warning prior to this strike, indicating that this was a targeting of some senior operative in whatever group that is targeting Israel. Israel, unfortunately, is no short of enemies on the other side of the Litani River, on either side of the Litani River, so to speak. But at the end of the day, we still have no official confirmation, and so we want to tread very carefully. It's very enticing to give our guesses, our presumptions, who it could be, but we will only make sure to only report verifiable and official information.
Only once the information is confirmed will we bring it to you. But very briefly, what we can say, Yaakov, is that if you were a senior Hezbollah leader, you would have reason to be quite worried about your safety.
Extremely worried. I wouldn't want to leave the bunker, to be honest, because the airstrikes are coming in. They're guided by very precise intelligence. Israel has total intelligence and firepower and aerial superiority over Hezbollah in Lebanon right now. So, if Hezbollah, when it fires those volleys and it's trying to show that it can still stay in this war, still fight a war of attrition, and it can, But, while most of their rockets are intercepted, most of their drones are intercepted, every single Israeli munition is reaching its target, and there's nothing they can do about that. So they're certainly in the losing position of this war. And the big question is, I think, at what stage will they break? Will their will break? And will they say, let's sign that agreement and take it from there so that we can stop taking all these losses and casualties? I think that's the main goal of these strikes right now, as far as Israel is concerned.
A developing situation. Yaakov Lepp and Ariel Oseran, thank you both so much for your insights. Now, Donald Trump has been making waves with some of the people he's picked for his cabinet when he starts his next term at the White House in late January. American Muslim leaders expressing their concern, saying they supported the Republican leader as a protest against the Biden administration's support for Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza. Reporter Danny Freeman spoke to residents of one suburb in Detroit, home to one of the largest populations of Arab Americans in the country. Take a look.
In Dearborn, Michigan, the campaigns and the candidates have gone, but the politics linger.
I think that the community is going to continue to be engaged and polarized.
In the final days of the race, Lebanese-American Albert Abbas welcomed former President Trump to his family's restaurant in Dearborn.
I, along with many others, truly appreciate that you made it a priority to visit Dearborn.
Abbas agreed to host Trump only after he pledged to bring peace to Lebanon and the Middle East.
We're very optimistic and hopeful, and quite frankly, I'm excited about a second term of a Trump presidency.
What was your reaction to some of these cabinet announcements? You see someone like Mike Huckabee as ambassador to Israel, someone like Elise Stefanik looking to go to the UN, Marco Rubio, all pretty hardline when it comes to the Middle East.
I'm not going to judge his appointees right now. We'll hold his feet to the fire once he's president.
President-elect Trump won the state of Michigan by about 80,000 votes. In the majority Arab American city of Dearborn, Trump won with 42% of the vote, while Vice President Harris only received 36%. Jill Stein, the Green Party protest choice of many anti-war voters, got 18% of the vote here. What was the perception that you thought Donald Trump will be doing?
So as Donald Trump told us, he will stop the war, but now he's putting people in office that are with the war, practically.
Dalal Baidoun voted for Jill Stein. She couldn't bring herself to vote for Vice President Harris because of the Biden administration's support for Israel. But she feels Trump has already squandered his goodwill in the Arab American community. How do you feel about voting Green Party now?
I feel good that I don't have blood on my hands because, like I said, they're all with genocide. So having to be not a part of all that makes me feel good.
Do you regret not voting for Harris?
No, because she's even worse.
How are you feeling now that President-elect Trump won?
Yeah, I'd say definitely a range of emotions. Disappointed is one. Angry is another.
Lexi Zaydan is one of the leaders of the uncommitted movement and left the top of the ticket blank. She hears the criticism that voters like her helped elect Trump, but rejects it, saying they wanted Harris to work with them.
You could have added every single vote in Dearborn and Kamala still would have lost. You could have added every single Jill Stein vote across the country, Kamala still would have lost. And so this wasn't a referendum on Gaza policy. This election was not lost because of Gaza or because of uncommitted voters. What it showed you is that she not only was sidelining uncommitted and Arab and Muslim voters, but she was sidelining other communities of color as well.
Do you have any regrets?
I have no regrets because what I did and what I believe uncommitted did in the last 10 months is we did everything we could to offer the Democratic leadership something to save this democracy and to save Palestinian lives.
Still in the U.S., FBI agents have arrested a Houston man accused of plotting a 9/11-style attack in the United States. It's alleged he was planning attacks on a synagogue and the Israeli consulate in the city. More in this report by Laura Argiri.
We've taken a suspected terrorist off the streets of Houston, Texas.
A suspect who the FBI accuses of discussing plans for a 9/11-style attack somewhere in the U.S.
He bragged that he would commit a 9/11-style attack if he only had the resources. And he expressed the desire to join the U.S. military just so he could commit an act once he was inside their ranks.
28-year-old Anas Saeed was arrested last week outside of his Houston apartment.
A search of Saeed's electronic devices allegedly revealed pro-ISIS images and communications. Such communications included the discussion on his alleged plans to commit violent acts in Houston and his desire even to use an explosive belt.
Following his arrest, Saeed allegedly told investigators that his planning included researching the layouts and security measures of Houston's synagogues and the Israeli consulate, along with creating ISIS recruitment materials.
Saeed allegedly created and edited at least 5 videos and 2 images that he then sent to an alleged ISIS social media and web designer.
Saeed has been charged with 1 count of attempting to provide material to a designated foreign terrorist organization. If convicted, he faces up to 20 years in prison.
And back in the Middle East, changing gears slightly to the world of culture, the Cairo International Film Festival is back. Some of the biggest stars in the region lining the red carpet in Africa's largest film festival. This year's event, of course, taking place during the ongoing war, with Palestinian films taking the spotlight, as our Joe Brown explains in this report.
The 45th Cairo International Film Festival opened its doors on Wednesday, and over the next week, almost 200 films will be shown, displaying the best cinema that the Middle East, North Africa, and the whole world has to offer. But amidst all the glitz and glamour, one topic is prevalent on the minds and the screens of the festival.
We have, I don't know the exact number, maybe 4 or 5 Palestinian films. Our opening film is a Palestinian film. We have a film comprised of 22 short films that were filmed in Gaza. And the people of Gaza are the ones who filmed them, using their mobile phones about the reality of their lives.
Normally held annually, last year's film festival was cancelled in solidarity with the people of Gaza. And this year, actors, actresses and directors made their feelings known, many of them wearing Palestinian pins and using their platform to condemn Israel's actions both in Gaza and in Lebanon.
The situation in Lebanon is very bad, as is the Palestinian situation and what is happening in Gaza. And because of this, the last Cairo Film Festival was postponed, and therefore we support the Palestinian people and the Lebanese people.
We are speaking about more than 400 days and the whole world can't stop the war in Gaza. We are talking about more than 50,000 martyrs and thousands under the rubble, plus 1.5 million refugees in Gaza moving from one place to another. This is too tough. And for us as filmmakers, it is important to document that through cinematic language.
The war also has an economic cost for the festival, as all sponsors with links to Israel were boycotted, meaning only local sponsors, such as Egypt Air, funded the event. But despite this, 73 countries submitted films to the festival, making up for the lack of an event in 2023.
The Hatzirim neighborhood of Kibbutz Kfar Aza was one of the hardest hit communities in the Hamas terror assault on the 7th of October. For a year, it has stood in silent testimony to the horrors of that day. Now there are new sounds ringing out, the sounds of construction and renovation, as thousands of volunteers respond to the call of the Brothers in Arms organization to help rebuild. More in this report by Hadass Hart Sinai.
Okay, good morning. I'm giving a morning briefing. One team is going to clear, one team is with me here in the excavations. If there's a siren, each unit here has a safe room. Enter it, close the window, close the door. We'll meet here at 8:30.
Kibbutz Kfar Aza, the Tzirim neighborhood, one of the symbols of tragedy, the first line of the horror of October 7. A year later, the same place, but a new name. The Green Floors neighborhood, an initiative of the Brothers in Arms organization carried out by Israeli citizens.
This project, first of all, begins with the inspiration of Omri Ronan, whose grandmother was murdered along with her caregiver 50 meters from us in the safe room on October 7th. And we decided it's time to start the wheels moving and make a change here and start building. There are 16 housing units here that we are starting to renovate, repair, build them from A to Z. Let me show you. What we envisage, the kitchen will be here, the bathing area here, shower, clothes dryer and a washing machine, toilet, refrigerator.
Listen, it sounds like work for professionals. So who actually...
In the early days, there were more than 3,000 people who volunteered, wanted to come, including professionals, including suppliers. There are electricians here, plumbers who come on time with an organized Excel file of their work schedule. They give their time and their heart to the work, and it's heartwarming.
They come from all over the country, from all political camps, all communities, and everything that separates us. Here they don't ask who you voted for or who's to blame for all this. Instead they ask what needs to be done and when can I come again?
Seeing this group of people, seeing their eyes, is really very encouraging.
I am a lawyer. I came to the kitchen. I was told that cooks were needed today to prepare food for all the volunteers. But when I arrived, they sent me to help with manual labor.
I am a biomedical engineer, and where there is a vacuum, I try to enter it to try to see what I can do with the little I have.
Exactly what we're doing here today this week. That's exactly what I came for.
Wow! What did you prepare for them today?
It's chicken meatballs with potatoes and lots of green spices.
She came to me yesterday and said, "Come on, we're going to cook for 100 or so mouths in Kfar Aza." I said I'll come check what's going on here, and then I will see which day. And by noon, I had already become the person in charge of the meals.
We are busy assembling cranes, renovating. We closed the company today. No one is working today, including our finance manager who knows nothing but writing has come to work.
We are stripping these buildings and renovating them from the ground up, including the outside. We are simply building a neighborhood, and we are building as a community. To bring a community back here, we are starting a process here of resurrection and renewal in one of the 3 kibbutzim where they snatched the most people.
It's the grass, it's the pergolas, it's to connect to the kibbutz, to understand the kibbutz days, when the kibbutz was still whole with all that passed through it. This is a huge privilege for us.
You sit at home, you watch the news, the heart cries, the soul shrieks, and you want to do something.
My son fought here on October the 7th, and when I heard, I said I had to come to see where he went and what he did. And also to feel that I am doing something for the revival of our country, for these amazing people here.
For me, the food and cooking for others, right now it gives me the opportunity to breathe.
I felt that after October 7th, I really couldn't help. And I felt as an Israeli that it was simple. It was not my place to stay there.
I feel I can't do otherwise. From October 8th, I feel that that's the meaning. It's a bit difficult for me. This disconnection, trying to get back to life the way it was, they won't be able to go back to what they were. I'm trying to help, do what I can.
These are my brothers. And by the way, when I say, these are my brothers, it doesn't matter who. If they're human, they're my brothers. It doesn't matter what happened and how it happened and why it happened. If there's a person in distress, you try to help.
My little brother, Captain Eli Zisser, the commander of the Zisser team in the Seyuret Makal unit. On the morning of October 7th, he was one of the first to enter here. Beyond the contribution I feel and want to make specifically in this place, the place where Eli was eventually killed, I feel like I have something more inside, a mission, something else to continue his path.
I know this will sound psychotic, but this volunteering fills my heart. I'm crying now.
Last year, we had a lot of volunteers here. You talk to them. Volunteering is back to how it used to be, from the heart. It ignites a great deal of excitement. It's a flame. It's an eye-opener. It brings tears sometimes, too. If we are real and honest and not cowards.
This is a time when we mainly meet in cemeteries, from memorial to memorial. All these days, wherever we met, that's what we talked about, that There are people in the dining room, so you know that it's touching.
The echoes of war are swallowed up here in the voices of rebuilding. They don't just build houses here. New rooms for the heart are also being built here.
Eventually, families will return here, build houses here. There will be children here who will laugh about it. The lawns provide a lot of strength. We'll continue our way.
Every time I come home from here, I play cool songs in the car. It's an hour or so drive and a real feeling of fulfillment, of hope.
Everyone who works feels that they are part of the history of the State of Israel, which in my opinion is the most important thing. When you want to start healing and restoring the country, it starts with action. It starts here.
And on that moving note, we wrap up the rundown for today. Back again tomorrow, same time, same place. I'm Benita Levine, live in Tel Aviv. Thank you for watching.
You live in Israel, or you are preparing for your